You might not expect criminal defense attorneys to be on the Rolodex of an autism advocacy nonprofit, but as Melissa Rosenberg, executive director of the Autism Society of Maryland, explains, it's necessary.
We are seeing a growing number of calls from adults overall, but I think across the nation, other groups just like us are getting calls from family members or individuals themselves who are caught up in the legal system, looking for resources.
She says individuals with autism are more likely to interact with the criminal justice system, both as victims and offenders, because they can have trouble picking up on social cues, communicating, or expressing emotions.
It can escalate very quickly, whether it's involved with a police officer or somebody else. Something happens and they get anxious and start acting in a way that maybe you and I would not react to a police officer, and things can very quickly unravel.
The Autism Society of Maryland is pushing for 2 bills to pass in the state legislature this year, both sponsored by Delegate Aaron Kaufman, who has a developmental disability himself, cerebral palsy. One would require judges to place defendants with autism or an intellectual disability on probation in certain circumstances. The bill leaves room for exceptions, like if the individual is a threat to public safety, and also requires the judge to consider the views of the prosecutor and the victim.
The gist of it is that, in my view, and the research shows this, people with autism and other developmental disabilities have less culpability than you or I would, because of the fact that the crime they commit is often a direct manifestation of their disability. And so neither bill is a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it is a recognition that the punishment has to fit the crime.
Of course, a concern that comes to mind is, how do you prevent people from taking advantage?
You would have to have a medical diagnosis of your disability, of your autism. You couldn't just come in and say, well, I did it because I have autism. You would absolutely have to have a diagnosis.
Another bill allows a diagnosis of a developmental or intellectual disability to be admissible as evidence in court and requires judges to consider the diagnosis when making a decision on whether to release somebody on bail or not.
The reality is that, in jail, somebody with autism, is more likely to be bullied or assaulted, isolated, solitary confinement, and just so many things that just do not need to happen.